Welcome to the Crazy Chicken People podcast. If you're crazy about chickens, then you're in the right place.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Crazy Chicken People podcast, and thank you for joining us again today. One quick announcement before I get started. Just wanted to mention that the episode of Bach Talk that I was on released on Thanksgiving, so if you haven't caught that yet, would love it if you check that out. Wanted to keep that quick, getting right into the show now. Have you guys ever wondered how people got by raising chickens for so long before things like monthly subscription boxes, mealworms that get delivered to your house, or $5,000 chicken coops? Yeah, me neither. In fact, I've been starting to wonder just how much do we actually need all of this commercially available chicken accessories that we see all over the place? And for that reason, in today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at some of the best DIY money-saving tips that you can consider for your flock. From treat dispensing toys that they can play with for hours, to free hacks for filling your nesting box. We'll cover all of my favorite easy, free, or at least very inexpensive ways that you can keep your chickens healthy and happy without having to lighten your wallet too much. Because keeping chickens shouldn't be something that anyone feels like they can't afford to do. It's one of the longest standing human traditions recorded, and until just recently in history, was something that was not only affordable, but for a long time was something more commonly practiced by those that were living a pretty humble lifestyle and raised chickens out of necessity rather than because it was fun. So with that in mind, let's jump into it. And to help keep myself organized, I broke this out into a few categories. So starting with some coop essentials. There's a few things that every chicken coop needs, and roosting bars is right up there with the most important of them. But that doesn't mean that you need to go out and buy anything if you have access to some fallen tree branches. I've started using these not only as roosting bars, but just putting them in the run for something fun to do. It is important that they're large enough. I'm sure you've all heard that, the flat side of a 2x4 provides enough room for a chicken to roost and keep its feet covered. So you want to choose a log that can provide the same thing. It's nice because it adds a really natural look to your coop, and you can find these free just about anywhere. Especially this time of year, it seems like there's always trees getting cut down, and I've never had a problem stopping and asking for a chunk of log or a long branch, whatever it was that I thought I could use out of there. And I would say that, not only do your chickens not know the difference between you skipping out on buying a piece of lumber, but I think they actually prefer the natural logs. I know in the coop that I have placed these up as roosting bars and kept the old ones up as an option. Most of my chickens seem to prefer the branches, and they seem to crowd up pretty quick. So maybe I need to add a few more in there. Another place that you can choose to save a few bucks is when you select litter for your coop. Whether you like to use sand, straw, shavings, maybe hemp or coffee grounds that seem to be getting popular, these are all great, but putting litter on your coop floor isn't necessarily something you need to pay for. Have you ever been looking around your coop for maybe some eggs that you expected to find in your nesting box but didn't, just to find that your chickens have been out stashing them somewhere else when you let them out? If so, then you've probably also found that your chickens are pretty comfortable laying in just about anything. Now, I'm not saying to start throwing trash on the ground and in your nesting boxes, but there are some free or really inexpensive options that, while maybe not as popular or trendy, will work just fine without causing any complaints from your hens. Fallen leaves and pine needles can easily replace shavings and straw that you might toss around to collect their poop or to put in the nesting box. These things are totally natural and just as safe as any of the options that you would buy. And I promise you, your chickens will not think that you're a cheapskate. In fact, piles of leaves in the run can provide a quick bit of fun as they jump in there and start scratching and tossing them around. They clean up as easily as any of the other options, and you can dispose of these just about any place, including your green waste can. And if you compost, then it still goes into your compost pile just fine. If this seems like something where, oh gosh, I'm cheaping out on something my chickens really need, keep in mind that for hundreds and thousands of years, shavings in bags and pine pellets just weren't available. So leaves, pine needles, dirt, can only imagine what else has been used for a long time with just as much success as any of the modern things. Okay, up next is nesting boxes. We talked about how to fill them, but what about the box itself? There's a ton of options out there for things to buy and a lot of really cool or fancy looking boxes for sale, but they can get pretty pricey. Even the simple pre-built wooden boxes that you see, I think they come in like a little boxed up kit. They are a lot more expensive than the materials used would have you think that they should cost. They might look a little bit nicer than something homemade, but that's about it. And if you've ever found eggs inside of an old tire, then you know that your chickens really don't care what that nesting box looks like. So why buy something when you likely already have something around that you could use? Some of the more common items that you may already have around your house or can find pretty cheap are a 5-gallon bucket. Those can be set on their side, throw some bedding in there, and that's ready to go. You can tilt them back a little bit so that the eggs tend to roll towards the bottom of the bucket rather than out the front. And even guard that front edge with a 2x4 piece of plywood if you like. They do make an attachment for a 5-gallon bucket that sets it up really well as a nesting box, but I don't really think the extra $13 gets you much. A milk crate is just about the right size for a nesting box. Plastic storage totes are something that everyone always seems to have a few extra around. They may be a little too tall, so you can just trim them or cut a little hole in the side for easy access in and out. Upcycling old cabinets and hanging those on the wall is a really easy way to set up some nesting boxes. I've actually done this in one of our coops with some cabinets that a friend gave us after remodeling a laundry room. In fact, in that coop, I've got the cabinets on the wall, I've got some nesting boxes on the ground that somebody gave me, and between those two options, the majority of those hens decide to use the corner horse feeder that still hangs in that stall. I would have thought that'd be the least desirable spot for them to lay, but chickens don't care what something looks like. They don't care what you think is cool. They just find a spot they like and go with it. Okay, so that covers a lot of the basics. We didn't really get into feeders and waters that much since we had discussed that on an earlier episode. We talked about some good DIY options there using 5-gallon buckets and the feeder ports or the little spring-loaded watering cups. Those are still my favorite budget option, and I actually tend to like them more than most of the ones you can buy in a store. Now, to get into some of the more fun stuff, we've talked a lot of times about how important it is to add things to your chicken space that provides them some enrichment and opportunity to keep themselves busy. You don't want a flock of chickens being cooped up day after day with the same flat ground to look at because they're going to find another way to keep themselves busy if they need to, and it may end up causing some problems. I always liken this to a group of children. Put a group of kids in a big room full of games, toys, and plenty for everyone to play with, and they'll probably do okay. Put that same group of kids in an empty room with no way out, and you're going to be dealing with some problems pretty dang quick. But that doesn't mean you have to go out and buy a chicken xylophone or a swing made just for your favorite hen. I've seen some pretty cool stuff that people have come up with. Your chickens will be just as happy with a repurposed old ladder placed in the run for them to climb as they will with any fancy thing you can go buy at a big farm store. You can create some different levels in your run for your flock to climb and explore up high by placing scrap lumber, maybe leaning up against the walls or hung from the roof if that's an option for you. My preferred option to that is more fallen tree branches around rather than having to buy 2x4s. They add an awesome look to it. You can possibly select some branches that still have a lot of leaves on them and maybe help provide some shade in your run. And you can easily move these around from time to time also. That way you're changing up the look and your chickens won't get bored of the same old thing. Something really simple and easy is standing logs. These don't even have to be very tall. Maybe you have some short ones, some taller ones. They can hop around on these. You'll see a hen use them to maybe jump up on and escape a rooster that's in pursuit. And what's cool is, you move these around every couple of weeks. You really get like a concentration of bugs living under these things. So if you have 5 or 6 in there, every few weeks you rotate those. And while you're moving them around, the chickens get to run in there and feast on all these bugs that have been living underneath them. So another free snack and some fun for your birds. Older logs that have started to rot out and are really coming apart, maybe these aren't as easy to find depending on where you live and what you have access to. But if they've gotten to that really soft point and the worms and different grubs in there are eating away at it, your chickens will have an awesome time tearing these logs up, scratching at them, clawing that old wood away and digging out the bugs that live inside to eat. This is really fun to watch, and I think you'd really enjoy having this in your coop if you're able to find a good log. Even an old tire, which I know may not be the most attractive thing to put in your run, although you can paint them and fancy them up a little bit. These can be a great spot to build your dust bath in. You can often get these free or very cheap. Most tires are just about the right size for a dust bath, and this again creates a large surface that if you move it around from time to time, say when you need to refill your dust bath, you continue to provide these exposed insects for your chickens to eat, and they just love it. A really cool one that I saw recently, and I need to try to make one of these this weekend, is this rolling treat dispenser. Somebody took a 1-liter soda bottle, poked a few holes in it, small holes, and filled it with some scratch. Throw that in the run, and the chickens realize pretty quickly whatever their favorite treat you might put in there is coming out of those holes. And as they move the bottle around, more treats fall out. So what I'm hoping to see, and I think would be so cool, is the whole group just kicking this plastic thing around. I was thinking I would use a peanut butter jar. The plastic's a little bit thicker. I think it'll hold up a little bit better. I wouldn't want the chickens trying to peck into it. I just think this is an awesome idea. It looks like it'd be really fun. Hopefully I do get one done this weekend, and I can post something on Instagram showing how that worked out. Now that's just a short list, but there's so many other things that can be repurposed for your chicken's playground. I've seen those little plastic children's playhouses used. We actually have one of those, the type without a roof, in with our goats. They love that. It was meant for the chickens, but somehow the goats ended up with it. Just about anything that they can hop up on top of or hide underneath, they'll find a way to make it part of their environment. Okay, I also wanted to hit on a few options for low-cost or no-cost snacks. The exposed bugs that we talked about underneath the logs, those are awesome, but don't exactly come around frequently. Now, none of this is meant to replace the base of their diet, which should be a high-quality chicken feed, but we do want to add a little variety. Wild greens, or weeds, are always a fantastic treat for your flock. I know we covered this extensively in an earlier episode, but again, the important things are verify what you're feeding them just to make sure that it's safe. Almost anything you find growing around the yard is probably going to be okay for them. Just make sure it hasn't been treated with pesticides or herbicides. And of course, your chicken scraps, right? I'm not breaking any ground with that. But to make it a little more fun, maybe you can put those scraps in a small basket or bowl that you hang up in their run. Watching them go after this as a group as that basket swings around all over the place is pretty entertaining, and I think they have a good time with it. You can make that pretty easily with some string, some wire, and something you have around to put that food in, or you can go spend $20 for basically the same thing. Maybe I'm a cheapskate, but I always lean towards the DIY option. Now you can do the same thing with heads of lettuce or even some wild greens that you bundle up. Just tying that up, piece of string. You don't need to go spend $15 on a small chain on Amazon that does exactly the same thing. But that'll last them quite a while as that thing swings all over the place as they try to grab bits and pieces off of it. Alfalfa or just about any grass mix hay are also really good for chickens, especially if they're not able to free range. This allows them to get some of those natural greens into them that are just really good for them in general. I know hay itself is not exactly cheap, but if you were to buy a full bale of it and you've got an average size backyard chicken flock, that $25 or $30 bale could last you months. But if you don't have the space for maybe that much hay or just don't want to invest that much into it, but I've found that most feed stores will either give away or sell very, very cheap bags of the loose hay that kind of builds up where they stack theirs. This is totally good enough for your chickens. You don't need it in the full flakes or anything like that. And I usually stick it in there in either one or maybe several piles, just depending on how many chickens there are. I want to make sure everybody's got an opportunity to get at it. But they love digging into that, kicking it all over the place, and running around eating it. It is a good, healthy option and very inexpensive. Now, the last thing on feeding, I've not tried this, and honestly, I'm not sure I have the stomach to, but it does seem like a pretty good idea. I don't know exactly what to call it other than a maggot bucket, because that's exactly what it is. The way I've seen this done, you take like a 5-gallon bucket, I guess a smaller 2-gallon bucket would work just as well. Drill some holes in the bottom, say 1/4-inch holes or so, throw some of your food scraps in there, hang it in the run. You want to keep this hung in a place that they can't get to it. because the idea is that food in the bucket will start to rot. The flies are going to get in there and start eating it, laying their eggs. Maggots are going to grow. And that's where the holes in the bottom come in. The maggots wiggle their way out of that bucket, fall on the ground, and, well, there's a disgusting little nutritious treat for your chickens. I can't imagine that smells good, but maybe if you set it up in the right spot where the wind always blows it away from you. I don't know if I could do this one. I kind of want to now that I've talked about it, just to see how well it works. I've seen it mentioned enough times that it must work pretty well. Just not sure if I could do that one. I don't know what that's going to smell like. If any of y'all have done that, I would love an email. Shoot me a picture or just a description of how that worked out. I'd be really interested in it. All right, guys, that's all I've got for this week. I hope that you found some things in there that you can use to continue to give your chickens a great environment, but without having to spend a ton of money. The more I think on it, I really dislike how chicken keeping has become such an expensive or seemingly expensive hobby. It just doesn't need to be that way. I feel like chicken keeping should be for everyone, and it should be something that is a benefit to your family, not a cost. So, hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving. I'm actually recording this Thanksgiving morning. Can't believe I talked about a maggot bucket before I go start cooking. That was probably not a great idea, but hope you all had a great holiday. Enjoy the long weekend with the family, and I'll talk to you guys next week.